back to the channel, and in today's video I'm talking about my favourite Simone Rocha collection. So if you aren't aware, Simone Rocha is a London-based fashion designer of Portuguese, Irish and Chinese descent. Her work mainly references her Irish heritage, which reflects where she grew up, in a small village in Ireland. She also sometimes makes reference to the other parts of her heritage. She likes to create voluminous silhouettes with soft fabrics such as tulle and lace, and her aesthetic is unapologetically feminine, with ruffles, bows and frocks frequently dominating her collections. Her garments mainly come in black and white, and she has stated that her frequent use of white is inspired by Irish communion and wedding dresses. And this aesthetic is very deliberate. Simone Rocha first encountered the work of Louise Bourgeois, one of her biggest inspirations, at Dublin's Irish Museum of Modern Art. When she saw Bourgeois' work, she was in awe of the stitched bodies hanging mid-air. This was an experience that she found both disturbing and intriguing. She was fascinated that the figures were inspired by the dichotomy between the beautiful female form and the aggressive mood created by the restrictive stitching technique that made the figures look like they were suffocating. Till this day, Simone Rocha translates this idea into her work, and she regularly pairs aggressive rocker accessories and footwear with soft fabrics in a collection. And this is why in a Simone Rocha collection, you can see the most delicate garment decorated with pearls and stones and spikes and things like that. It's this dichotomy between the delicate and the harsh. And that inspiration point comes from Louise Bourgeois, who she has cited as one of her biggest inspirations, and her influence is imbued into every single Simone Rocha collection. In an interview with Charlotte Brooke at Harper's Bazaar, Simone Rocha expanded on what she means by this. She said, "Contrast is so stimulating. Even when they're grotesque, Louise's works always contain something soft in them, and vice versa. I use a lot of tulle, gossamer lace and delicate fabric, so to ground them, I'll put a very practical heavy shoe at the bottom. That tension between fantasy and hard realism is what I want my clothes to balance on." An aspect of Simone Rocha's work that I really love is this dichotomy between what you can see and what you can't see. And it's quite interesting because when you first look at Simone Rocha's collections, it looks very conservative. It looks like it covers the whole body. I mean, the dresses are really long, the jackets are long, the socks are long. It just looks like Simone Rocha's work covers the body. But actually, Simone Rocha likes to play with this idea of showing what you want to show and revealing what you want to reveal, and then covering the other stuff that you don't want to. And so she will use sheer fabrics in some parts of a garment and then more solid fabrics in other parts. So she's revealing certain things, which is quite interesting because yes, the silhouette might suggest that it's conservative, but when you actually wear it, there might be a lot that's revealing. But I like also that it makes her clothing versatile for a lot of markets, because then if you don't want to reveal the parts that are sheer in a Simone Rocha dress, then you can just wear an undershirt or an undergarment in general. Which means her clothing is suitable for a Middle Eastern market, of course, because it's not as revealing, but then it's also suitable for the Western market, which is just so interesting. And this is actually an element of her work that takes reference from Louise Bourgeois, who believed that clothes are as much about what you want to hide of the body as what you want to expose. And as such, for her Spring/Summer 20 collection, there were many references that were an ode to her cultural heritage. In Ireland, young boys and men, known as wren boys, used to go out into the woods and hunt and kill a wren and parade the bird through the town on a decorated pole. This Irish celebration is held on St. Stephen's Day. These wren boys go from door to door, dancing and asking for money to bury the hen, wearing an attire that typically consists of homemade straw costumes, painted faces, masks, and old Irish clothing. In recent times, to avoid animal cruelty, a fake replica bird is now sometimes used instead of a real wren. And the tradition is not held all across Ireland, but only in certain regions. This idea of straw costumes that wren boys wear can be seen across this collection, which features everything from straw trimmings to accessories like bags and headbands that are made using straw. Wren feathers were also painted on the faces of models to represent this tradition. This inspiration expands further as Simone Rocha also imagined the house interiors of the houses that wren boys would knock on. The tablecloths, curtains, and wallpapers of their homes have all been recontextualized in this collection and woven into the framework of this collection. The set of the collection was also picked to help keep this mood to the collection. It was held in a restored Victorian theatre in Alexandra Palace, and the faded look of the interior was specially chosen to represent the houses that the Wren boys would knock on. Folk songs were also played during the runway show to bring about this idea of this Irish culture and these old traditions. China has a rich history when it comes to pottery, and this was also a big inspiration point in this collection. During 14th century China, blue and white porcelain dishes were created. This was done by decorating dry porcelain structures with refined cobalt blue pigment mixed with water and applied using a brush. It was then coated with a clear glaze and fired at a high temperature. In smaller quantities, porcelain pottery with red pigments were also commonly made around the same time in 14th century China. In the 17th century, a lot of Chinese porcelain was imported to Europe through trade between Eastern and Western countries. However, when this porcelain was imported to the West, only the rich could afford it. So Dutch potters found cheaper ways to imitate this Chinese porcelain to create cheap alternatives for people that couldn't afford the imports. This style is now known as Delftware, and many prints in this collection are an ode to this inspiration point. That's why you see a lot of decorative patterns in blue and red shades on a lot of pieces in this collection. I also find it as a very interesting commentary on inspiration points that are lost, because a lot of people associate this sort of blue pottery with Delftware and with the Dutch, when actually it originates from China. And a lot of Chinese pottery, like especially the ones that have blue pigments, were actually inspired by Iraq in like the 9th century. This is really old stuff. And it's crazy that associations change just because obviously Europe imported this stuff and then made their own alternatives. And it's kind of like a deeper commentary on how there are a lot of things that we deem as European, but they actually originate from somewhere else. Or there are things that we associate with certain countries, but that's not actually where these things originate. And I thought it was quite an interesting point to sort of shed light that China has been a big innovator, especially when it comes to pottery and ceramics. And of course, Simone Rocha's signatures were present in this collection as always. Soft ballerina shoes and sandals were decorated with spikes, creating a tension between the delicate and the tough, a theme that Simone Rocha uses in almost every single collection. And pearls, which are at this point synonymous with the brand, were used as decorations and accessories across the collection, whether we're talking about on trousers, headbands, bracelets, necklaces, earrings, socks, bags, and much more. Yes, it was a whole lot of pearls. There were looks with ruffled chiffon, and across the collection there was a heavy use of organza, tulle, lace, and other delicate fabrics, playing with revealing parts of the body, mixing solid and sheer fabrics in looks. And yes, that is why this collection remains one of my favourite collections of Simone Rocha's, because it's the perfect balance between a mix of her Chinese and Irish heritage and also all of her signatures all in one collection. We have the pearls, we have the soft and the hard, we have the spikes on the ballerina shoes. It's all these dichotomies coming into one at once, and I think in my head it's the best representation of what Simone Rocha's work is and what her brand signifies in a way. And so that's why it's my favourite collection. I know I titled it like Simone Rocha's best collection. That's really just clickbait. I don't think it is Simone Rocha's best collection. I don't think in fashion you can do that. Like say this is someone's best collection, when these things are really subjective and it comes down to how well you enjoy the references and how they're used and the garments in a specific collection. So people's favourite collections can be really different. But on that note, let me know what you like about Simone Rocha's work. And if you want to know how you can learn about fashion more effectively, I have an ebook on that, which you can check out in the description below. I heavily recommend it. And on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon.